Sleep's one of those things that we assume should be simple, right? You go to bed, you sleep, and you wake up restored the next morning, ready to begin again. But for many women, sleep's really been that straightforward. More often, it's something you've had to manage rather than something that simply happens. You develop routines, you become disciplined about when you go to bed. You learn how to function well the next day, even when the night before wasn't perfect. But for a long time, that approach works well enough to keep life moving. The thing with sleep disruption is that it tends to creep in slowly. Gradually, your body becomes a little less cooperative. Rest feels a little less restorative. And the rhythm that once felt predictable starts to feel slightly unreliable. And at first, it's easy to explain away, right? Perhaps work's been particularly demanding. Perhaps there's been more stress than usual, or perhaps you sense that hormonal changes are beginning to play a role. So the natural response is to try harder to dial things back in. You refine your evening routine, you experiment with supplements, you optimize the environment in your bedroom. And you start looking for the strategy that's going to restore the sleep that you used to rely on. And sometimes those things help for a while. Yet clinically, disrupted sleep is really about a lack of effort. More often, it's your body communicating that something in the underlying physiology is shifted. Hormones change, nervous system patterns evolve, and the accumulated load of responsibility begins to register in ways your system can no longer override. So, when sleep begins to shift, most women notice that it shows up in patterns. Not always dramatic problems, but recognizable experiences that keep repeating night after night. So, for some women, the hardest part is still getting to sleep in the first place. You go to bed knowing you're tired, your mind refuses to settle. Your body feels ready for rest, yet your brain continues to cycle through ideas, conversations, tomorrow's responsibilities, or things you suddenly remember you forgot to do earlier in the day. For others, falling asleep isn't the issue at all. You drift off reasonably easily, but your body wakes you in the early hours of the morning and your mind suddenly fully alert. 2 or 3 o'clock arrives, and instead of sleeping, you're wide awake, mentally reviewing decisions, planning the next day, replaying the conversation that already happened, feeling frustrated that there's only 3 hours before your alarm clock's going to go off. And then there's the experience of fragmented sleep. So you might technically sleep through the night, but the sleep itself feels thin, almost as though your system never fully drops into deep rest. You wake in the morning feeling strangely depleted, like the night passed, but your body never truly recovered. And it can be confusing, right, when you glance at your fitness tracker or your sleep app and it tells you that you slept for those 7.5 hours, but your body feels as though it barely rested at all. And there's also a version of sleep disruption where the problem isn't the number of hours in bed, but the quality of the restoration. You might sleep what appears to be a full night, but you wake with a sense that your system's still carrying yesterday's fatigue. Your body feels heavy, your mind slightly foggy, and the energy that used to return overnight, well, it hasn't quite reset. Many women try to solve these problems quietly, adjusting routines, experimenting with supplements, improving sleep environments, or searching for that missing variable that's going to restore the sleep they remember having before. But these patterns aren't random. There's signals emerging from the systems that regulate sleep: your nervous system, your hormonal rhythms, your metabolic stability, and the cumulative load that your body's been carrying. And once we begin to look at sleep through that physiological lens, the conversation starts to change. Now, like I said, when sleep becomes unreliable, the natural instinct is to focus on the sleep itself, to assume that if you could just find the right supplement or routine or the right combination of habits, then the sleep would correct itself. But clinically, sleep disruption's really just about sleep. Sleep's just the end result of several physiological systems working together. Your nervous system, your hormonal rhythms, your metabolism, and your circadian timing all contribute to whether your body can move into deep restorative sleep and stay there through the night. When one of those systems shifts, sleep's often the first place you'll notice it. So, one of the most common contributors is your nervous system. Your nervous system's constantly scanning for safety. When it perceives that things are stable and predictable, it allows your body to move into the parasympathetic state where deep rest and repair can occur. And when your system's been carrying sustained responsibility or a prolonged cognitive load, it can begin to hold that subtle level of vigilance. Even when you're physically exhausted, the part of your nervous system responsible for monitoring the environment can remain slightly alert. And that alertness can make it difficult for you to fall asleep. And it can also explain why your body wakes easily during the night. Now, as we know, hormones also play a powerful role, particularly during perimenopause and menopause. Estrogen and progesterone influence many of the neurotransmitters involved in sleep regulation, including serotonin and GABA. And these help your brain transition into deeper sleep stages. So, as these hormones begin to fluctuate, the stability of those signaling pathways can change as well. So, at the same time, estrogen plays a role in how your brain regulates body temperature. So, when that regulation becomes less stable, it can contribute to night waking or the sense that your body can't maintain deep sleep in the way that it once did. Now, here's something interesting. Blood sugar regulation is another piece that often surprises people. It's not something people tend to think about when it comes to sleep. So, your brain requires a steady supply of glucose through the night. And if your blood glucose drops too low while you're sleeping, your body activates a protective response. Stress hormones such as cortisol and adrenaline are released to bring glucose back into circulation. That's pretty cool, right? This is all happening without you being aware of it. And those hormones are incredibly effective at doing their job, but they're also effective at waking you up. And this is one of the reasons some women notice a pattern of waking suddenly in the early hours of the morning with a very alert mind. Now, of course, our circadian rhythm also plays an important role. Your internal clock coordinates the timing of cortisol, melatonin, body temperature, and metabolic activity across that 24-hour cycle. So, when that rhythm becomes disrupted by stress, irregular schedules, hormonal changes, or prolonged nervous system activation, the signals that normally guide your body into sleep can become less precise. So, when you step back and look at these systems together, a different picture is starting to emerge, right? Sleep disruption's not random. It's often your physiology responding to shifts in hormones, metabolism, nervous system regulation, or circadian timing. And understanding the why behind these shifts matters because when you understand what's happening inside your body, the goal is no longer simply to force sleep to happen. The goal becomes restoring the conditions that allow your body to feel safe enough, stable enough, and supported enough for sleep to unfold naturally. When sleep becomes unreliable, it can start to show up in your health and resilience. Why? Well, sleep's one of the most important biological processes that your body relies on for repair and regulation. During deep sleep, your brain clears metabolic waste, your immune system recalibrates, hormones are regulated, and tissues across your body move into active repair. And it's also when your nervous system moves most fully into the restorative parasympathetic state where recovery can occur. So when sleep becomes fragmented or shallow, then these processes are affected. And over time, this can influence many areas of your health. Your blood sugar regulation becomes less stable, your cortisol rhythm might become more erratic, inflammatory processes can begin to increase, and your brain has fewer opportunities to fully clear the metabolic byproducts that accumulate during waking hours. And that's why persistent sleep disruption often shows up alongside other changes, right? Your energy becomes less reliable, your mood can feel more reactive than it used to, your concentration might be harder to sustain, and your body can start to feel as though it's constantly trying to catch up. So, when sleep changes, your body's often signaling that the systems responsible for restoration and regulation just need a bit of attention. And for women who carry significant responsibility in their work, there's an additional layer to consider. Because sleep is one of the primary ways your brain restores its capacity for complex thinking. During sleep, your brain processes information from the day. It consolidates memory, it regulates emotional responses, and it resets the neural networks responsible for decision making and strategic thinking. So, when your sleep becomes inconsistent, those processes are affected as well. So, you might notice that decisions that once felt straightforward require a bit more effort. Or maybe your tolerance for complexity can feel slightly lower than it used to. Situations that normally wouldn't trouble you can feel more mentally demanding simply because your brain hasn't had the same opportunity to reset overnight. So, this isn't about you, it's about physiology. Now, many high performing women are amazingly skilled at compensating for this. You continue showing up, you continue to lead, to deliver at the same level that people expect from you. And from the outside, very little appears to change. But internally, the effort required to sustain that level of performance can gradually increase. You see, sleep's not separate from how you lead. Your ability to think clearly, to regulate your emotional responses, and navigate complex decisions is deeply connected to the quality of restoration your brain receives overnight. Which means that when sleep begins to change, it's not only a signal about your health. It's also something that quietly influences the way your brain, your nervous system, and your leadership capacity interact every single day. So, when sleep changes in the ways that we've been talking about, the instinct's usually to focus on solving the sleep itself, right? To find that right supplement, the right evening routine, or the missing piece that's going to allow your body to return to the rhythm that it once had. But often, sleep disruptions revealing something deeper about how your system's been operating for a long time. So many of the women who experience persistent sleep disruption are the ones who are known for being capable, the ones who carry responsibility well, the ones people trust to handle complexity, make decisions, keep things moving when situations become demanding. And over time, your nervous system adapts to that level of responsibility. Your brain becomes really good at holding multiple streams of information at once. It's tracking what's happening now, it's anticipating what may happen next, and it's mentally preparing for the decisions that are going to be required. And that ongoing mental processing is what I mean by sustained cognitive engagement. Your mind spends large parts of the day analyzing, evaluating, planning, and solving. And those abilities are part of what allow you to lead effectively. But your nervous system doesn't automatically switch that pattern off when the day ends. If your mind's been running at that level of engagement for years, it can remain slightly vigilant, even when you're trying to rest. So, in practical terms, that can look like your mind continuing to scan, reviewing a conversation from earlier in the day, anticipating how a meeting tomorrow might unfold, mentally checking whether something important's been missed. And there's an important biological reason that the scanning matters. Because your brain's not very good at distinguishing between something that's happening right now and something that you're vividly thinking about. So when your mind begins replaying a difficult conversation or anticipating tomorrow's board meeting or mentally preparing how you're going to respond to a challenging situation, your brain interprets that activity as something that requires attention. And from your brain's perspective, the event is effectively happening right now. So your physiology begins preparing you to deal with it in this real time. Stress hormones such as cortisol and adrenaline, they rise slightly. Glucose released into your bloodstream to fuel your muscles and your brain. Your nervous system shifts towards alertness so that you're ready to respond. In other words, your body begins mobilizing resources for the situation that your mind is focused on, even though you're lying safely in bed. That mobilization's incredibly useful during the day when you're navigating complex decisions and real world challenges. But when it happens in the middle of the night, Because you're ruminating, it makes it harder for your system to return to the deep restorative sleep that you need. So your body simply learned that staying mentally alert has been useful. Eventually, though, your system begins asking for a different rhythm. Not less capability and not less responsibility, but a way of operating where your mind can move more easily between periods of engagement and periods of restoration. And sleep is often where that request becomes most visible, right? And when you begin to notice your sleep disruption through this lens, it stops being simply a problem to fix. It becomes useful information about how your nervous system's been supporting you for years and what it may now need in order to continue to support you well. So, once you begin to understand why sleep might have changed, the next question naturally becomes, what can you do to support your body? When sleep shifts in ways that we've been talking about, the most effective approach is usually to support the systems that regulate sleep rather than focusing on sleep in isolation. So, as I said, one of those systems is your nervous system. We talked about how your mind can remain in a pattern of scanning and problem solving long after the workday is technically finished. So, helping your nervous system transition out of that state becomes an important part of restoring sleep. And so, one practical way to begin doing this is to create a deliberate wind down period before bed, where your brain's no longer processing work, decisions, or complex information. So, for example, a simple and effective protocol could be to treat that final hour of the evening as a transition period. Lights are dimmed, screens are switched off, anything in your mind is written down, and activities shift towards things that signal safety to your nervous system. Reading a book, a physical book, not one with blue light sitting behind it. Gentle stretching, journaling, or a quiet conversation all help your physiology move gradually out of daytime alertness and into a state where sleep becomes accessible. Metabolic stability is another piece that influences sleep more than many people realize. So, if your brain requires a steady state of glucose while you're sleeping and that blood sugar drops too low during the night, your body's releasing that cortisol and adrenaline to bring glucose back into circulation. And these hormones are really good at waking you up. So, for some people, a small snack before bed, which includes both protein and carbohydrate, can help stabilize blood sugar overnight. So, something simple such as yogurt with berries or an apple with nut butter. This provides enough fuel to help your brain maintain stability through the night, and it can help to reduce that early morning waking. Hormonal changes obviously can influence sleep patterns, particularly during perimenopause and menopause, when you've got that estrogen and progesterone levels fluctuating. But one of the lesser known aspects of this transition is the role that your liver plays in metabolizing hormones. So, your liver is responsible for processing and clearing estrogen. And when that process becomes less efficient, the balance of circulating hormones can shift in ways that influence sleep, temperature regulation, and nervous system activity. This is one of the reasons why women often report that they're less able to tolerate alcohol when they're transitioning through that perimenopause menopause journey. Supporting liver function becomes an important part of supporting hormonal balance. And this can include ensuring that you've got enough dietary fiber so that metabolized hormones are properly eliminated or maintaining regular bowel movements. And it can also include foods that support liver detoxification pathways, such as your cruciferous vegetables like broccoli, cabbage, and kale, or bringing bitter foods into your diet. Circadian rhythm is another important factor in restoring sleep. So, your body's got this internal clock that coordinates melatonin, cortisol, body temperature, and energy production across that 24-hour cycle. So, two of the strongest signals influencing that clock are light and darkness. And you need to work with both of these, right? So, morning daylight exposure helps anchor your circadian rhythm. So, even 10 to 15 minutes of natural light early in the day sends a powerful signal to your brain that sets the timing for hormone release later in the evening. And ideally, you want this to be natural outside light without your sunglasses on. So, at night, reducing exposure to bright and blue light allows melatonin production to rise naturally, and this helps your body to prepare for sleep. And let's also talk about our sleep environment. So, research consistently shows that the optimal room temperature for sleep is between 16 and 19 degrees Celsius. Keeping the bedroom dark, quiet, and within this temperature range supports the physiological symptoms that allow that deeper sleep to happen. Now, what you'll notice about this interplay between these systems is that none of these strategies work in isolation. But when your physiology is supported and your environment aligns with how your body regulates rest, sleep often begins to stabilize again naturally. This is exactly the kind of recalibration that we focus on inside Revitalize. So, Revitalize is designed for women who recognize that their sleep, their energy, and their nervous system resilience have shifted, and they want to restore the physiological foundations that allow their body to function well again. So, if what we've talked about today feels a little familiar, you can learn more about Revitalize at my website, tracytati.co.nz/revitalize. And that's revitalize with an S because I'm in New Zealand. Because the way you think about sleep really matters. Your beliefs shape the signals your brain sends to your body. And when sleep becomes something you struggle against, your physiology often responds with more vigilance. When you begin to understand what your body is communicating, the conversation naturally starts to shift. So that instead of fighting your body, you can begin to work with it. And that's where the real restoration begins.